So I'm here today as not only co-author but vice chair of the Legislative Black Caucus on behalf of Dr. Weber, who's the chair, and presenting AB 3121, which would establish a task force to study and develop reparations proposals for the descendants of enslaved people here in the United States. The task force will consist of 8 appointed members and will compile the historical record of black slavery and the aftermath in California and this nation. The bill would require the task force to recommend the appropriate way to respond to the history of enslavement impact black people in California today. Those who are victims of injustice at the hands of our government have the right to redress. We should not grant black people a lesser standard. This bill requires an in-depth review of the impacts of slavery and in California and creates the framework to address this shameful history. I respectfully ask for aye vote. Today we have witnesses Antonio Moore and Dr. Kinjus Watson.
This is Antonio Moore. Thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of the ADOS movement and American descendants of slavery across California. The history of racism in California connects to a larger federal level discrimination from slavery to redlining. The resulting costs has created immense wealth inequality that AB 3121 will allow us to study for impact. Even though California entered the Union as a free state, we must be clear, the framers of the state constitution wrote into law the systemic denial of suffrage of others and other civil rights to blacks. Some even denied entry of all African Americans to California. California even had a fugitive slave law, as mentioned earlier, that stated any person brought to California pre-statehood as a slave would be considered a slave in the eyes of the law, even though the California Constitution banned slavery and the state entered the Union as a free state, affecting thousands of blacks brought to the state of California during the gold rush. We see the results across our economics. African Americans with this lineage have been, in effect, rendered wealthless. Due to the cause inequality, according to CalMatters.org, in the article, The Hidden Toll of California's Black Exodus, the black population has plunged 45% in Compton, 43% in San Francisco, and 40% in Oakland. In addition, a recent report called Color of Wealth, done of Los Angeles by UCLA, Duke, and the Federal Reserve, further reflects this showing. The middle white family in Los Angeles is worth $355,000 hard assets. The Middle East Asian Indian family is worth $460,000 hard assets. The middle Chinese family worth $405,000. Even the middle African black family is worth $160,000 hard and $60,000 liquid. The middle native ADOS black family in the city of Los Angeles is worth a mere $200 liquid and a few $1,000s hard. California is leading the way, designating that we review reparations to American descendants of slavery through AB 3121, and I respectfully ask you vote aye on AB 3121.
Thank you, sir. And next is Dr. Kinjus Watson of the Ralph J. Bunche, I believe it's pronounced, Center for African American Studies at UCLA. You've got about a minute, sir. My apologies.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me here. Honored to be able to speak on behalf of and with support of the Bunche Center. I'm actually in the research lab at Health and Equity Research Lab in the biology department at SF State. And as the center and my colleague mentioned, California was a free state in name only. And these rarely cited realities are only a few examples of many historical and explicitly anti-Black state policies and practices that inform the ongoing everyday and extreme challenges that depend on Black wellness in our communities today. So it includes this expansive and disproportionate incarceration of Black people in the state's penal system. As was mentioned earlier, outcomes of redlining and exclusive zoning policies. And really, even before COVID-19 pandemic, and despite all the advances in healthcare for the general public, our life expectancy as Black people remains stapled to that of decades past. Black people in our state, much like Black people across the country, have higher rates of morbidity and earlier mortality than other groups. And these realities, as well as longstanding abuses by policing agencies that frequently, casually, and callously undermine Black life expectancy, are inextricable from the consistent outcry and uprising crystallized in the ongoing movement for Black lives. I think that any assertion that the conditions of today have not been manifested by the conditions of our past are blatantly ahistorical and incredibly harmful. In fact, my own research shows that the ongoing impact of trauma and slavery is implicated in the cells of Black people. I think we have an opportunity here to engage in a study of how we might meaningfully redress this harm, and I applaud the transformative leadership of Dr. Weber and the Legislative Black Caucus, and urgently call on all members of this committee to support its passage through the legislative process so that the depth and breadth of evidence necessary to fully consider this critical issue is given its due time and cause.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your testimony. Position on the bill.
My name is Kim Mims. I am here on behalf of Ada, Sacramento, and Ada, California, and I strongly support AB 3121. Please vote yes.
Thank you, ma'am. Next witness.
Chris Lodgson, ADOS Sacramento, ADOS California, strongly support AB 3121. Please vote aye.
Thank you. It's so nice to have live bodies here. We welcome you and thank you for your patience and willingness to testify.
Line 213, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, yes, Rayford Renee Quarles, ADOS, Los Angeles. We would like to encourage you to vote yes on the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness.
Thank you. Line 241, please go ahead.
Hello, this is Michael Thomas with ADOS California, and I am part of the ADOS San Diego branch and also a member of BAPAC San Diego and also a member of NAACP San Diego branch. I urge you to vote yes on AB 3212. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness.
Thank you. Line 228, please go ahead. We'll move on to line 75. Please go ahead.
Hello, my name is C.O. Thomas, and I'm with ADOS California and ADOS SoCal, and I support AB 3121, and I urge you all to vote yes on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness.
Thank you. Line 52, please go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Monica Tolliver. I'm with the American Descendants of Slavery, San Bernardino County, Inland Empire High Desert Region, and I support this bill. Please show your support for Bill 3121. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness. Madam Moderator, do we have any witnesses in opposition?
I have no lines in queue at this time.
Very good. Let's bring it back to discussion by the members. We're going to start with Senator Borges, Senator Wieckowski, Durazo, Monning, and I believe Senator Gonzalez. So let's go ahead, and the floor is yours, Senator Borges.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Many of you know that I have strong involvement in Greek and Armenian related issues, and for a long time I have advocated for reparation discussions given the loss of property, the loss of life, the loss of valuables in territory when there was the forcible exchange between Turkey and Greece in the 20s. Prior to that, the Pontic genocide, Greek genocide, and the Armenian genocide. Is right now the appointments would be from the governor and the leaders of the assembly and the Senate. What I don't see, and I think it's essential, just as we've looked at South Africa, Cambodia, Armenia, and elsewhere around the world, we've had these catastrophes, is that when a group is convened, that these individuals be properly schooled and disciplined on matters that are relevant to the body itself. So here's my recommendation. Would the author consider that the 8 appointments be expanded? I don't know to what amount, but that it include comparative law experts. And the reason why I bring that up is because the report on the creation of this commission talks about various United Nations organs in different treaties and other obligations to understand how other countries have done this. So comparative law expert, someone experienced in, for example, as a Holocaust scholar or a South African apartheid scholar.
Comment on at his close. I've asked him to do that. Senator Wieckowski.
So, Madam Chair, I too would like to do a shout out for Allison Meredith, who wrote the staff report. This is my 10th year in the legislature. I've been in the Assembly and Senate Judiciary committees all the time, and everybody does a wonderful job. This is something that was well written, but it also tees up this task force, because, we can go back 155 years and ask, why was this not done when the Civil War was over? And then you go into, the Jim Crow laws in the turn of the century in the early 20s. But the staff report highlights how the New Deal was really a white deal, and that it excluded domestic workers and agricultural workers, which, seeing it as I read it yesterday, jumped off at the pages with me. And then I moved into the GI Bill, which excluded, in the red line that we all know about, and as it excluded the African-American people. And then you get into the criminal or...
Convey my thanks to the author, Assemblymember Weber, her leadership on this and so many related issues, and to the presenter, Senator Bradford. I also want to just offer my thanks to Allison Meredith. It's an amazing analysis. I've printed it out to share with family members, and I guess I can also forward it as an email attachment when I figure out how to do that. But so many who, including myself, were taught in schools that California was established not as a slave state, and that was one of the fights that took place in Monterey in whether or not the Constitution of the state of California would recognize the institution of slavery or not. And while it didn't formally, you look at the legacy and vestiges on so many fronts, recognizing ownership of other people by people coming into the state of California, the denial of property rights, the redlining, and the list goes on and on.
I'm the author of this report, to your staff. Pretty amazing, and I think we all want to, just gonna rush to share this across the country. There's, I'm sure, a lot that will be uncovered in terms of the material damage and losses that were inflicted on generations and generations of Black Americans, but there's also the trauma, and there are a lot of things. Someone asked, when does it stop? It stops when we get to the bottom of it all. It stops when we really figure out the extent of the damage to generations of Black Americans.
Testimony in person and over the phone. I too am in strong support. I will say that back home in Long Beach, we're creating a framework for reconciliation. I think this action here will set the stage and the floor for what could be done back home in Los Angeles and all across the state. I hope that cities see this as an opportunity to educate not just in the California history, but the history of each of our cities in terms of reconciling the history of, for instance, the KKK that was in Long Beach in the 1920s that we've just realized, and understanding what we can do here to change the change where we're at and improve. And it's not just acknowledgement, it's going to be listening and coupled with a lot of action.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Bradford, and to Dr. Weber for educating all of us, not just those of us in the building, but it sounds like students around the state and the nation are benefiting from your insistence on some truth and reconciliation here in California. I did have a question just in terms of the scope. I was looking at, there was a Washington Post investigative piece about some of the histories of private and public institutions' complicity in slavery. specifically universities, military institutions, churches that had a sort of documented history and went back far enough to actually trace that and do the accounting. And as my colleagues and you all have brought up, California's history is not as a free state, but as a sort of a secret slave state. And in fact, the gold rush, I applaud the ACLU for their recent work publishing Gold Chains, which documented the history, in fact, of us selling slaves in this state and bringing slaves in and essentially building California's economy on the back of slavery in hidden form.
Seeing no further debate or discussion, I want to thank you as well, and thank the 100 or so people who got on the phone and patiently waited to express their support for this measure. It is more than long overdue. Boggles my mind that we are so ignorant, actually, of a lot of the history of this country. Even those of our ancestors that were not complicit back in the 1850s, who were either ignorant or uninformed. And frankly, in reading this document, I realized that I also, like I think probably most of us, are not aware of the depths of the discrimination and the extraordinary dehumanization of our brothers and sisters in the African-American communities. If you'd like to close.
If I was smart, I would take your comments as my close, but I will try to respond to some of the issues that Senator Borges raised as far as the number of the composition of this committee. Right now, we're hoping to get this with 8 passed, okay? So I'm pretty sure we look at a larger body if that was possible. Yes, we would. But as you say, you eat the elephant one bite at a time, so we're starting with that 8. But we're sure, and we are going to insist that those 8 are the most knowledgeable people on this with this issue. We're not just going to assign and hope people be assigned willy-nilly to let's look at reparations. We want historians. We want people who have a legal background, research background, all those things that are going to be necessary to trace back all the damages and rights that people who have been enslaved are entitled to throughout the 400 years of being brought to this land. As far as the diversity of opinion, that's critical. And if you were speaking to party, I think only our current president was not aware that Abraham Lincoln was a Republican, and not understanding that, he probably wasn't aware that African Americans up until the early 60s were Republicans. So we want diversity of political party. That's who we were as a people.
I'd made some recommendations. I'm not asking you to comment on them further. Can you take these recommendations to the author and see whether or not, before it makes the Senate floor, if she would give serious consideration to articulating in detail the proposed constitution and composition of this commission? Because I think
Senator, it's not a point of order. We've had closure. Senator Bradford has closed.
Thank you for the consideration.
It's now time for the vote. And if you wish to discuss this with him further, I'm sure he'll be happy to do that. It's now time to vote on the measure. We have a motion due pass to Senate appropriations. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senators, please turn your microphones on. This is file item 17, AB 3121. Dr. Weber, Assembly Member Weber. The motion is due pass to the Senate Appropriations Committee. Jackson.
Aye.
Jackson, aye. Borges. Borges not voting. Durazo.
Aye.
Durazo, aye. Gonzalez?
Aye.
Gonzalez, aye. Melendez?
No.
Melendez, no. Monning?
Aye.
Monning, aye. Stern?
Stern, aye.
Stern, aye. Umberg?
Aye.
Umberg, aye. Wachowski?
Aye.
Wachowski, aye. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 7 ayes, 1 no. Everyone's here.
7 ayes, 1 no, 1 not voting. The measure passes.
Thank you, Madam
Thank you,
Chair and
Senator
committee
Bradford.
members.